The podcast you're about to hear was made with Anchor. You can use Anchor to make a podcast right from your phone, no experience necessary. Plus, it's completely free. Get the app at anchor.fm/podcast.
Hello all you doomed to die, welcome to The Great Everything. Today in philosophy, Arthur Schopenhauer was born in 1788. Oof, where to begin with this guy? Okay, how about he was the biggest, the most depressing pessimist you'll ever come across. A total nightmare at parties. His contribution to humanity is The World as Will and Representation, an absolute masterpiece of misery, which the historian Will Durant called that great anthology of woe, which, let me tell you, is pretty damn accurate. But he's also super important because he moved philosophy away from the Enlightenment, where it was all about understanding the outside world, how do we perceive objects, what is matter made up of, and took it back to us, to what it feels like to just be human. And the answer is not very good at all. According to Schopenhauer, the world is will, strife, and misery. We're all just brutes with no free will, ruled by passions and desires over which we have absolutely no control. And our prime directive is just to get laid so we can reproduce, love is just an illusion, and then we die. Yay! I'm going to expand on his philosophy in the next segment, and I urge you to stick around because it is actually very fascinating. So I'll take the opportunity to go into a little context here. He was born in the age of pessimism. The glorious French Revolution, with all its hopes of democracy and brotherhood, had failed, and it had ended with Napoleon's dictatorship. And then Napoleon, who was supposed to export democracy into the rest of Europe, he got his ass handed to him in some of the bloodiest wars in European history. Many people died. And in all this, the Enlightenment with Voltaire and all those dudes, they had pretty much been like, who, God? Ah, yeah, he's not a thing. So you could see that most people would look around and say like, well, there's no hope. It's just meaningless chaos. And that's the world Schopenhauer came into. And his own rejection of love and happiness, etc. Consider this. The guy never got married, probably never even got laid. He really hated women. Oh my, just Google Schopenhauer and women and you're bound to get a chuckle. It's just the worst. It might be because he and his mother had a really tough relationship. I'm trying to think of a comparison, but I can't. The point is they hated each other, were super mean, and she once kicked him down a set of stairs. So maybe that explains a little about why he's such a douche about life generally and women specifically. I guess if I were to spend the last 20 years of my life sad, alone, and only in the company of a poodle, true story, I'd be a pessimist too. But instead, I'm here with you celebrating this utter dick's birthday. Oh, and you know who else's birthday it is? Schopenhauer. Oh no, wait, I mean Chopin. No, I mean Chopin, the legendary pianist and composer who was born today in 1810. You know, he's the one who, whenever someone doesn't listen to any classical music, but wants to say they listen to classical music, they always say Chopin, right? Oh, the Nocturnes. So I'm playing some of his music right now in the background by Martha Argerich. If you haven't heard of her, check her out. She's a great Argentinian pianist and one of the best Chopin pianists ever. I'll leave you to the stunning genius of Chopin, played by the stunning genius Martha Argerich. This has been Today In. I'm Patrick, and catch you later, hopefully, with The Great Everything on Anchor. Arrivederci. Hey, it's Patrick, and I'm back to tell you a little more about the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. As I mentioned in an earlier segment, this guy is the biggest pessimist you're likely to find in Western philosophy, and he's one of the first to bring philosophy back from the abstract, almost physics of people like Kant, and back to what the human experience feels like. Okay, So he starts his magnum opus, The World as Will and Representation, with the words, "The world is my idea." Brilliant. But what does it mean? He's saying that the external world is known only through our sensations. We don't actually see what's out there. We only see what we perceive. We're looking through colored lenses, our perceptions, our senses. So that's his starting point. But then he says, to gain access to the external world, to understand it, we must first figure out the nature of our own mind. In his own words, we must begin with that which we know directly and intimately, ourselves. Until Schopenhauer, the mind has always been seen as consciousness. But Schopenhauer saw consciousness as only the top level, the surface of the mind, like the crust is only the outer layer of the earth, beneath which we know very little. Underneath the consciousness, you have the will. The will is base desire, instinct, spontaneous action, but it's more than that. It's the prime mover, it's the vital force behind all things, all beings, and the universe itself. It's the unchangeable and eternal part of us, like the Christian soul, but it's also the force of gravity, of electromagnetism. It's the processes of existence itself. If you're familiar with Eastern philosophy, you might have heard about Brahma and Atman, and Brahma is the one, the God, the universal spirit, and Atman is made of the same stuff as Brahma, but it's the individual soul. So inside you, you have a seed of the universe itself. We have our own will, but will is a larger universal force, and it rules everything. Even when we think that our intellect, our reason is in control of things, reason only leads as the guide leads the master. The will is the strong blind man carrying on his shoulders the lame man who can see. What a great quote. But the point is that the will is in charge. But what is the purpose of will? Well, the highest form of will is the will to live. It's our prime directive, to defeat death, which to living beings means reproduction. And to Schopenhauer, love is just an illusion. It's there to mask our fundamental will to reproduce in order to defeat death. To Schopenhauer, we are just leaves on the tree of the species, manifestations of the will of the species itself. So, as long as the species survives, that's as good as we're going to get. Will is eternal and unified. Space and time is what makes everything seem as separate from us. It's what the Eastern folk call the veil of Maya, the illusion hiding the unity of all things and making them seem separate. See, when I hear this, I'm thinking, well, this is awesome. Everything is connected, we're all one thing. Brilliant, right? No, because Schopenhauer is saying that there's a problem here. Will implies desire, and desire can never be satisfied. We always want more. Desire is infinite. Fulfillment is limited. We're all just doomed to want, and then just as we start to develop wisdom, our brain starts to decay, and then we die. Everything is just misery and strife. Existence is suffering. That's Schopenhauer and will in a nutshell. You can see why it's influential. On the one hand, this is the first guy to really bring Oriental philosophies into the West, but also he's saying that beneath our consciousness there is a force that we have no control over that completely dictates how we act and what we desire. This is a very clear precursor to Freud's subconscious and unconscious. So hopefully that gave you an idea of what Schopenhauer and his idea of will is all about. But if you have any thoughts, questions or musings, do let me know because I'm really interested to hear them. So until then, catch you later on The Great Everything. Arrivederci.
We live in an absurdly and painfully optimistic world. Mostly, that's the result of all the businesses out there trying to sell us things, and understandably, using cheerfulness to do it. And partly, it's the influence of technology, which is always getting better, colouring our view of life as a whole, which often isn't improving. In the process, we've lost sight of the wisdom of seeing the glass half empty. For centuries, religions peddled dark messages. Buddhism told its followers that life was suffering. Christianity spoke of the fallen state of mankind and of the inevitability of earthly imperfection. That was helpful. It kept our expectations in check. The psychologist William James came up with an equation. Happiness equals expectations over reality. So there are two ways to ensure contentment: change reality or change expectations. Pessimists know to reduce the expectations. Good pessimists rehearse some key lessons to themselves every day. Life generally goes wrong. Everyone is worried and sad most of the time. It's normal to have very big regrets around careers. The only people we can think of as normal are people we don't yet know very well. It's hard to be happy for more than 15 minutes. Almost all your hopes are going to be dashed. Mediocrity is the norm. Today, however grim, will probably be one of those days you end up looking back on and wondering why you didn't appreciate more fully. That's how much worse it will eventually get. Don't think of us pessimists as grim. The gap between what should be and what is can be filled with laughter. A generous laughter born of certainty that today will go wrong, tomorrow will probably be even worse, until the worst of all happens. But that's okay.
The podcast you just heard was recorded with Anchor. If you want to make your own, download the Android or iOS app completely free from anchor.fm/podcast. That's anchor.fm/podcast.